All right. Got recording on Audacity and Zoom. So now we can go back to that. All right. So we got to go see Jordan's lecture on Rule 7. Imagine who you could be and aim single mindedly at that. So, what did you
Is it
think?
rule 7 or rule 2?
Rule 2. I didn't mean to say Rule 7. Rule 2. Rule 2. Imagine who could be and aim single mindedly at that.
Okay. Overall, I thought it was good. I finished reading the book earlier that day, and I spent quite a little bit of time actually on rule 2. The day before. So I think that was really salient and really awesome. Of course, any of the rules I'd be happy with.
Yeah.
So overall, I thought it was really good. It was an interesting lecture. We had an event that happened during the lecture that upon initial inspection was a mild form of protest, but turned out to be someone who got hurt. So we wish them, a speedy recovery in all that regard.
Yeah.
Pretty sure they won't see this. However, it was definitely interesting.
Yeah, it was not it wasn't expected, and I think that's where Jordan's little joke about, well, that's not a protest song I'm familiar with. But it seemed like that was the moment where it was like everything was coming into alignment or getting in tune, because that's where Jordan was trying to figure out how far out he could come close to the people sitting there to talk to them and not get feedback from the microphone.
Yeah, it was definitely good. He was getting the lay of his argument. You kind of, I definitely was trying to wait to see where it was kind of going. And that's probably part of the reason, because we were talking briefly that distraction kind of pulled me away from it. And so I had a hard time dialing in after, like, leading up and then going kind of through that. So overall, though, good. And once I was able to dial in and start, seeing some of the other things, I was going, oh, okay, I know where you're going now. And it was good. It was good overall. It was a great conversation. Turns out I had some friends of friends there as well that I didn't find out until later.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They sat on the other side of, like, so like the same orchestra like area. They sat on the other side.
Oh, okay.
So, and they met Peterson too. So it was good.
Yeah, I fumbled the ball when I went up.
It's okay. I think I had a death grip on the handshake, didn't let go. So it was like a graduation photo. But it's good though. It's good. And I think at some level, when you encounter people who you admire and stuff like that, there is a little shock and awe, and it takes a little practice, just like taking a little practice to brief a C-suite person or a general or whatever the case may be. It's definitely useful. So yeah. I don't remember, and this is probably a short-term memory loss because I did not get a lot of sleep last night.
Okay.
So I probably need my memory jogged on some of the points. I know he kind of, oddly enough, during the conversation, I thought it was really interesting that Jordan was comedic. I think either intentionally or not.
I think he may have picked that up a little bit from being around Dave Rubin for the last book tour. Because I mean, he had instances when he was lecturing at the University of Toronto. He had instances where he could make some. I think it was unintentionally funny, and other times he would make some jokes that were funny. But I mean, he was really on it on the game.
Well, it's kind of like talking about like something so serious, and then it kind of alludes to the conversation he had earlier that some of these jokes, like he's actually, it is somewhat humorous. Of course, I'm pretty sure there's the what is it, the idiosyncratic or not, that's not the right word, but the peculiar person out there who's like, that's not funny. But I mean, he said a few things, and everybody was like, Yep, that's pretty spot on. And it was a tasteful humor, I thought. It
Oh
wasn't
yeah.
out of the way. It was just kind of happened and manifested itself. And because he was talking about what was it? So he kind of opened up, Michaela opened the show and talked about kind of the major projects that are coming up, which I'm super excited for. And I'm really excited for his new book that will come out here soon, and his poetry songwriting book, well, whatever that may be, because that's something I've been really interested in my own time. So I'd really like to see what that is, even if it is dark. Like, that's fine by me. So one of those things that she alluded to that actually became a core part of the conversation was this program that will start kind of like putting the different domains in your life in order, or kind of working on that. And of course, I don't know all the domains, but like relationships, career, whatever the case would be, right? Hobbies, interest. And in this conversation, we start talking. He starts going down that path, and one of the major areas that it's like, okay, so if I do this, and this, and and I start to explore this area, and then maybe I bite off more than I can chew, something to that effect, then I die. And that, I mean, granted, I'm not gonna like I butchered the joke, the punchline, and all that, but I was able to do that a few more times, and it was accurate, tasteful, and funny. But the point of that was, you have to have some baseline, I think, and you also have to kind of put those domains in some kind of order and aim at the highest ideal. And I thought that was, I mean, maybe that's a good synopsis, because he puts in a few stats, he puts in a few areas, and it makes a few other digs and a few other conversation points throughout the talk. But overall, I think that could kind of be the I guess the potatoes of the conversation.
Yeah.
One.
Yeah, they're the writing, that was the central theme, is being able to write and think properly.
Yeah.
And it does tie to that, the rule of imagine who you could be and aim single-mindedly, that because you have to be able to think your future clearly. A lot of people have goals that they do seem to be too broad or too generic, and you have to be able to take the generic or the general or the broad and make it more specific. And he identified the 7 dimensions that typically he asks as a clinician. I know there was some area of disagreement you had initially.
Yeah, I think so I don't say call it disagreement. I think so. What I do in my channel and Meaning Forge, right, is I talk about how we create, find, make meaning, and all that different stuff. And I do it by listening to people's narratives and stories, and what's salient to them in this conversation and stuff like that. And I mean, he even says, like, at some level you can't focus on all of them, but if you can get one of them right, then that's a good sign, right? And then if you can get multiple domains right, that's a better sign. And that's where, like, he kind of made a few digs at, like, polyamorous culture, I thought. He's like, good luck.
Well, the thing is that the literature on polyamorous and pan, well, I don't know about pansexuality.
It's just polyamorous culture in that regard.
The polyamorous thing is, if you look at all the literature, especially in the psychological clinical literature, it's all anecdotal. So there's been no real studies of the consequences of polyamorous relationships. There's really no good literature when it comes to, well, what's the effects on polyamorous households with children.
I mean, but there's a slew of domains, and he even mentioned, like, you better have something right in other areas. Hang on one second.
Got the sneezies.
I'm still close to the division, ladies and gentlemen. So as you're well aware, with going on with Ukraine and whatnot, so I get airplanes over my house all the time. And now
okay. So
I had a C-17 flying over my house.
Oh crap. Okay.
Yeah, nothing bad. It's kind of normal in more ways than one. It's just a little bit more frequent right now as they're doing things.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
but
okay. I know sometimes if I got to sneeze or something, I'll turn
yeah,
away
yeah.
from
Sorry,
it. Okay.
I could have muted my mic. I didn't. It was way too deafening for me on my end. So maybe
Gotcha.
you guys didn't pick it up, and that's a good thing,
No,
right? So sorry
no,
about that.
no, it was never, it was never picked up.
So back to those domains, right? And I think and maybe it's not the aspect of the talk, but like there's like the meat and the potatoes of the conversation, right? I had shepherd's pie too yesterday, so um, very apt. And writing is definitely there, right? And I think writing is in a lot of Jordan Peterson esque talks. Like if he doesn't bring it up, like the self authoring program, at least once, it's not a Jordan Peterson talk. Okay. Uh, I don't mean that as an insult or anything. It is just, it's just kind of like it's what I expect because like he's very heavily involved. And I agree with him. Writing is important. And so, the meat, the potatoes, is writing and also aligning yourself to the highest ideal. Right. And that's where I think you and I had this conversation yesterday a little bit. And what I notice and what I've noticed, right, and I'm sure you've seen the same thing, is people put way too much emphasis in one area, one domain. And what Jordan Peterson, I thought, alluded to, and maybe it's just a conflict of like language, right? Because I don't think I disagree with him in more ways than one. I was looking for it more explicitly.
mm-hmm.
Was like you should have a higher order meaning. Like instead of just domains, right? I think we kind of talked through it, but like you have domain, and then like a meta domain.
Yeah.
And that meta domain of meaning is where everything comes from. So that way, in the event that one of these domains drops out, like a child dies, you lose your job, whatever. I mean, it's going to suck. Make no mistake. You're just a little bit more prepared and you can be reliable and you can take on responsibility because now someone's abdicated that responsibility. And so now you can start leaping forward, like not leaping forward, but at least moving forward one step at a time. Does that summarize? I think that summarizes our conversation a little bit,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah. And because at first you were like, well, I don't know if I agree with the ideal and then all these sub goals toward that ideal. And then now I think we were.
I didn't disagree with the ideal. What I disagreed was the domains need to be aligned to it, right? In some
Is
way,
this
they
your
can't
thinking
be
or is this what he
decentralized,
was
independent.
thinking?
Huh?
So was the ideal the sub ideals need to be aligned to the to the big greater meta ideal. That's where
Yes.
now that is that where your line
Yeah.
of contention is? That's what you're thinking.
That's what I was looking for explicitly.
That's what
I
you
was
were
looking
okay.
for something like that explicitly. Now I'm not saying like we could very well be talking about the same thing, and Jordan Peterson could very well be saying that, and that's how he defines it, right? And that's okay. Like I'm not against it. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to that's why people wrestle with ideas, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm wrestling with this idea. I'm trying to understand it and trying to put it into understand it in his language and understand it in my language. And I think overall, I think that's kind of what happened in this little give or take, tit for tat to go through it. Of course, I couldn't ask the question because we were too busy talking about other things
Well,
in our Q&A.
well,
So
the Q&A. Christina says I need to learn to be a little bit more assertive, like that one lady at the end when she's like, "Hey, one more thing." Like actually vocalized it, whereas I didn't want to be rude. But
so side note, what I would sit here and say is yes and no. It's one of those things that like everybody is gardening, like okay, let's be honest, like that's our hero, right? In more ways than one.
Yes.
And so like everyone is trying to touch their hero. They're trying to get that recognition. And some people are going to do more and be more assertive than other people.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I'm a very much kind of go with it type of person when it comes to this, because like if it happens, great. But if it doesn't happen, I'm not going to sweat it.
Yeah.
Just because like
I think things would have been a lot better had the two guys that wanted to spar with him would have just not done
shut up.
that. Well, that wasn't the place for that.
Exactly. Like they should have just shut up. I said it. like just like we were sitting in line, right? Like I appreciate the heartfelt conversation. I do. And I think everybody does, right? I know he does. There's a time and a place for stuff like that. And if you can condense it down to 20 seconds, that's it. You have an elevator pitch, and it's less than an elevator pitch.
Yeah.
You have a handshake.
Yeah. And I flubbed my wording up when I said, psychological
Happens, man.
influence, because I'm sure I would certainly hope that he understood what I meant, but it probably came out really, really wrong.
Well, don't beat yourself up either on it too, because it is still true in that regard. And then also the other regard here is, you guys engaged, you had that, like, I guarantee you 9 out of 10 people in that line who had not done that before froze. I froze mid headshake, and I didn't let go. So heads up, it happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but what in like Q&A aspect, I think there's an etiquette, and some people want to show how smart they are. Some people want to take on that, be disagreeable, all that fun stuff. Some people want to sharpshoot or something like that. Good luck. Like the last guy, like what is it? The second to last, the guy with the flashy shoes. I mean, sure, he's a great guy, and I'm sure he's super smart and all other fun stuff. But I just kind of was like, so the one time you have to sit down with Jordan Peterson, you're going to take that shot. Okay. I don't have an issue with that. Like if that's a shot you're going to take, that's a shot you take.
Yeah. I really wanted to be able to be like, hey, look, I just want to clarify. I commented on a YouTube video of yours in 2019. You commented back with, hey, that's great. Pay it forward. Here's what I've done to pay it forward. And this is what I plan to do to continue doing that.
Yeah. And that would have been great, man. Like it would have been great. I also I was also thinking, it would have been great too for people to recognize the staff that put together the event, right? Stuff like that. Now granted, people want to go toe to toe, and that's fine. Let them go toe to toe. There's an etiquette, I think. Don't go like you don't give me a thesis. Ask your question.
I was the dude that was going into the military, whoever it was that barked behind us. I think you saw the stink eye I gave the guy when I turned around.
Oh, I thought that was to me.
No, that was to that guy, because that was like, that's rude. Like what's wrong with you?
I didn't remember what did he say.
I just know that one dude said he was going into the military, and some dude like behind us like did the barking sound like woof woof or some. Just some,
I don't remember
something
that.
that dudes do, and I turned around and just gave. I glared at the guy, because it's like, come on, this is an intellectual. We're back in high school.
Well, I think there was definitely a part where I piped up too. I don't think every military member or veteran did, and that was when he said, "You better be able to take the joke," and we're like, "You fucking better."
Yeah, which is fine, but going back to the idea of the domains and
oh yeah, and circle back.
Yeah, okay. And I think this is where I try to clear it up. It's like, and I brought this up, and this is why I brought up the review that I had written of Beyond Order was it's very reminiscent to Glasser's idea of reality therapy, which was a book that came out in 1962, because as a psychiatrist, William Glasser was tired of giving people meds, and still he wasn't getting patients discharged back out of the hospital. And so he came up with this idea of using choice theory and basically saying, okay, you have choices, you have wants, you have needs. Your total behavior is how you get your wants and your needs met. Right. Mm-hmm. And so you can choose the behaviors that you're going to act out to get what you want or get what you need. And then we can evaluate that. We can say, okay, well, how's this working? And then, well, if it's not working out the way you'd like it to, well, what other ways could you behave and act out in a way that you could get your wants and your needs met in a way that works?
Mm-hmm.
But that's totally up to you. You get to have the choices of the behaviors you're going to act out. Okay. And so you could say, well, okay, well, if you were to like, and when I say you, I don't mean you specifically. This could be anybody listening to this, is, if you were to look around at your life and think, okay, this isn't ideal. This isn't what I want. This isn't working out for me, and things could be a lot better. You just have to imagine what that would be like, and really consider it and think, okay, what would the ideal life that I could have if I could have what I want? What would that look like? And this is the idea of making it specific, right? Conceptualizing what that would look like that could lead you to, let's say, an ideal, right? The meta ideal, the meta goal. That's what would life look like if I could have the life I wanted. All right, then you can break it down into those smaller sub goals or subdomains, right? Family, friends, intimate partnership, career versus job. That's 4 or 5 dimensions right there. So, you can work toward those, you can achieve those, and that'll make that, say, abstract or that ultimate goal or ideal, a reality, hence reality therapy, which is the therapeutic intervention that Glasser came up with. He wrote the book in 1965, and it examines, what a person wants, evaluating what they're doing to get what they want or need, planning out new patterns of behavior, and then acting them out to see if that works adaptively, adequately, and it works. And that's the central model of that therapy. And it's one way that, clinicians can help clients with making their ideals become reality. And that's a thing that Peterson also brought up too, is reality. It's not just, well, here's the world and here's all these material objects.
Yeah. I often I do the same. I often equate the materialist worldview. Like, I have no issues with materialism, but it's like you're walking in a dark room, and what material and science does is it just gives you an idea of what those objects are in that room, and that you bump into. And it's not necessarily how you move through, it's what you move into, because science is fundamentally inert. I'm pretty sure people will love to take me to task on that. So, and that's fine.
Science tells you what things are, right? So, like the example where I was talking about the polyamory thing and how that's supposed to work. Well, if you wanted to study it as an actual an actual scientific investigation into that, say from a psychological science, all right, you'd have to have a hypothesis, and you have to be like, okay, what's your hypothesis? And you don't put in it as like, well, this isn't going to work because X, Y, and Z. The hypothesis would be null if X, Y, and Z didn't exist. And so you have to set up those parameters. You have to set up how you're going to investigate it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to do the statistical analysis to find out if there's any significance at all, which means that your hypothesis test has to be less than P equals 0.05, which is like 5%. So you have what is it, like a 5% margin of error or 95% margin of error. It's been a while since I've done hypothesis tests, so I'm pretty sure I'm getting this wrong somewhere, and somebody that does math is going to be like, oh, well, this guy's a psychologist and doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. But it's been a while since I've done it, so
there's always going to be people like that. So might as well just get over it and just say it and get it and go forward from there.
Right. But you basically, you want your evidence. If you actually have found something there, then your final answer is going to be less than 0.005. That's like statistically significant, because then it's not skewed at one side or the other. It's actually somewhere. Instead of being in the mean, it's outside of that. It's either an outlier at the negative or the positive, and it's not within the mean distribution. So it's not going to be under the bell curve or under the arch or whatever you want to call it there. It's not going to be part of the mean. It's going to lay outside of that. That's when you have something that's statistically significant about it. And then you have to repeat it over and over to make sure that the phenomena that you're investigating that it wasn't a fluke, that it wasn't part of your bias, that it can be replicated and it has to be replicated enough that you can predict it to where it's an actual phenomena rather than just, you went looking for something and you found something you were looking for, and you're shoehorning it into a place where it isn't really there. So that's where the scientific method and that problem of induction that you were talking about, that's where it's useful. But as far as like how to act in the world, no, you can't use the scientific method on how to act in the world.
Yeah, and so so it kind of comes back to Hume in that regard. That's a problem of induction issue because you can't repeat it. And then also when you take it outside of that, right? When you take it outside of the certain controls and whatnot, and you have multiple variables and whatnot, there's no guarantee that it works, right?
Right.
Or you can repeat those results because now you're operating in an infinitely more complicated system or complex system, and then that leads to is-ought gap, right? And so that's a hard thing to reconcile. We're pattern-seeking beings, and what we find from a materialistic perspective is not always useful in how we ought to act. And so that I think if I may, one of the things that, kind of thinking about right now is, so while we have these models, these psychological models and, stuff like that, where we can effectively, in a way measure, right, how we're like, SMART goals, for example,
It depends on what you
attainable
mean by, it
goals.
depends on what we're meaning by smart, because now we're getting into treatment
I
planning
I
territory.
was kind of thinking I was thinking when I said smart, like there's like an acronym out there
Yeah.
that's like
It's
measurable, attainable, realistic, time
timely
based, something like
and
that, right?
it's like succinct, I think, is the other part of it. It has to be
Specific.
specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have to be
Yeah.
specific
Yeah.
goals. They
It's
have
all
to be
coming back to me.
measurable, accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is a good tool, right? In some ways, like as you start writing these things out.
Mhm.
And so one of those things is kind of like going, okay, so I'm in this place now and I want to aim at the ideal. I want to become the best person I possibly can, whatever that may be, that meta goal. And I think we can have a conversation how we reach the meta goal too, because I think there's some interesting areas we can look at there. And so then we start writing out our experiences, recording this data, just like working out, right?
Mhm.
So if I work out and I'm lifting heavy on deadlift or something like that, and I start recording my weights and stuff like that, does it mean I keep going up every five? Like, do I keep going up or do I stay where I am? Because there's other implications if I go up or something like that. And so that's it's important to do those things. And I think that kind of gets to that attainability aspect and how we define those, and we can see those patterns, right? And I think this is where I'm going to kind of start going into, what the meta goal could look like, or how you get to the meta goal, because over time I'm a pattern seeking being.
Mhm.
And so I develop a series of patterns, and if I can have that contextual knowledge, I can better understand, right, what's real. And I guess let me back up here, because there was an interesting comment he said, right, about what's real, because
Mhm.
something happens with facts, X, Y, and Z occurred. Okay, but then when I go back and I look on that, because memory is the way, this is oddly enough how memory can work too, I can impose a bias or something like that. And when I reinterpret that bias, that becomes slightly problematic, because now it's not telling exactly the truth. But if it helps me progress forward to become a better person, is it the truth? And I mean, I just, that's kind of an open-ended kind of idea there, because, if it works in that regard, it's true.
And that gets into the idea of what it means for things to be true. There's scientific truth.
Exactly.
There's the truth in so far as, well, if it works and you get what you want, then it's true enough.
Yeah. That's the and that's a whole nother conversation to have. And so pattern seeking is pattern seeking, problem of induction, all that fun stuff is terribly exists in our society. It exists in our religions all the way back from shamanism. So like it's there. We're pattern seeking beings. I mean, synchronicity is built on this. And kind of getting to that point, like to the other, like, part of the meat and potatoes here is, you understand those domains, you write those goals out, you measure them in some way in a microcosm. Maybe they're independent of one another, right? But you can run yourself into a trap if you're not linking it to the overall meta goal. And then in a way, I think you have to write all of that out and really make sure that what you're writing is as true as it possibly can be, and you're not trying to bullshit yourself when you're writing it.
Well,
And that's where.
well, that goes back to what you want.
Well, hang on. I'm getting into that if you don't mind. If you don't mind, like just the last few moments here, it was really important. What look at how Jordan references Mark, and he references ask and you shall receive and stuff like that, right? And that I think is there's a joke there he did too. I think when he said it, he's like, this is where like the atheist types go, or something like that. Great mannerisms, by the way. I really enjoyed his mannerisms when he talked. And the idea here is that when you're writing this, you are really writing this. You are not that's not bullshitting yourself. You're actually trying to write the truth down, and really, it's not like, oh, I want to live in a fairy tale land, right? No, like it's being honest with yourself as you possibly can be, and this goes to the first rule in the first book, right? Tell the truth, or at least don't lie.
I think it was rule 6,
something like that.
But it was definitely one of the top ones.
Yeah. And I think all of that together, and hopefully I didn't get too complicated. I think I kind of built something that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think I'm about to throw a monkey wrench into it.
Go ahead and let's see if we can reconcile it.
Okay. So what Peterson said about asking not asking you shall receive, knocking and the door shall be open, all of that. And that's true insofar as, if you're honest with yourself, you write these things out and you set up your plan, you do it specifically, measurably. And the thing is it's by your own definition based on what you want and what your metrics are going to be. Because not everybody's metric is going to be the same. Things might be more general, things might be more specific, and hey, more power to you on how you want to do that. That it's what you want or what you need, and all of that, right? And it's not a concept that's unique to Christianity either. In fact, it goes back even into the pagan religions in a sense, or at least the neo-paganism, the idea of the spellcraft. You write down your spells and you write down your intent. Well, in a sense, that's a form of meditation and prayer on these things, because what you're doing is you're wanting to bring something into the world. You want to manifest something, so you're really pouring over into your intent. You're meditating it on it in a sense. And everyone that is in those neo-pagan new age religions, there's nothing really magical about it in, say, like a scientific sense, but the magic's within. It's the same idea of the motivation. If you believe in it to the point that it's true, then what you're trying to manifest in the world through your spellcraft, you do bring into the world. So it's so it's true. This goes back to the idea of truth among many different domains. So you get to look at it as it's true within the New Age sense, it's true within the Christian sense, it's true within the
I mean, you can go all the way back to Norse mythology, Greek mythology. I mean, all of these things are prevalent throughout. I mean, it's really
it becomes like a deep metaphysical truth when you really think about it.
Yes, I would agree. that will leave the propositional framework completely mind boggled. So anyway, so what was the wrench there? You said you're going to throw a wrench into it.
Well, the wrench is, I would say the wrench in it is that you have to set the parameters of your measurement.
Yes, you do.
Right? Because if you try to set the parameters of the measurement wrong, then what you're trying to do is going to be counterproductive.
And you die.
And you die.
That was part of the joke.
That was
literally, like,
yeah.
We went down this rabbit hole like 4 times. Like, he was like, and you die, and you die. We were all dying. It was a good time.
Yeah. Because if you do it stupidly, you die.
Yeah. You do it stupidly, you die. You don't accept those consequences, you die. You do too much, you bite off more than you can chew, you die. You go too far down a rabbit hole, you die, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and that seems, as biological creatures, that seems to be unacceptable to us as a species, and so that's why we act as
that
if
we can help. You know, to the degree that we can help it, right? So in that, I think that becomes an issue with moral agency, right?
Yeah, which he
or
talked
individual
about.
agency, because now it's like going, well, you have a choice, man, and if I believe in some degree of agency or a lot of agency, then you can effectively go and do whatever it is that you do, and fail, right? Or even if you're don't have all those things, you can still fall into that trap. So 1,000 ways to die, right? Or a million ways to die.
Especially in the West.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you picked up on the reference, good sir. I'm glad. Well, this is something that I think this is a minor sidebar, right? One of the things that I kind of think about too, I've been watching a lot of Viking stuff, and this is actually a question that I really kind of wanted to ask Jordan. There's a rise, and I liked how you phrased it, neo-paganism, and particularly the Norse gods.
That
Norse
seems to be what's
mythology.
popular now. It used to, a lot of people went with the with the Celtic gods and goddesses there for a while in the early 2000s.
Yeah, and now it's in the Norse area, and that's interesting, because
it's the projection of a desire for the masculine to manifest itself in a world where masculinity is what would you say, discouraged.
Well, I mean, it's not. I mean, masculinity is in a way. It's not just masculinity and other things.
Well, I mean, the Vikings are the archetypical representation of what's masculine traditionally.
I would say the northern mythologies are heavily masculine in nature. Celtic, Arthurian, some of the Gaulish stuff. And keep in mind too, Greco-Roman mythology too has some very strong masculine tones with it, but somehow we've
it's the image of the Viking is the projection of the ideal masculine. It's a projection of the collective animus. Really.
Okay, so let's kind of dive into this for a minute, since because like this is really a question I wanted to ask. I'm like everyone has their stuff, and of course, like, I just really want to be like, hey, what's your take on neo-paganism? And so one of the things is, it's not just the masculine image, right? I think we have to kind of categorize this, because as I said earlier, like, there's different cultures that have different masculine images, right? Like Cincinnatus for Rome was a masculine image. There's a guy who in Rome mythology who is captured, I think, by the Carthaginians or something like that, and then like on the death, like swore over a fire, putting his hand in the fire, that he will go back to Rome and whatever. What is this? One, it's definitely a masculine image, or at least maybe not a masculine image, but the ability to be dangerous and wield it appropriately. And I see this more in the military environment. Then it's not just that, it's also a sense of adventure, a deep sense of adventure that is captured by the Vikings. Now, for some reason, the age of discovery in the 1500s is not this sense of adventure, but it's somehow associated with Norse mythology, right? And it's, oddly enough, it's also very colonization. So,
Well, so
the
the
anti-colonizing
Vikings at the time that they were out doing their raids and discovering new land, you're right. There is a call to adventure there. There's a taming
Mhm.
because water is typically considered a feminine symbol because it's chaos. It's the unconscious from a Jungian perspective. Anytime you dream of water, whether you're on it or under it, that's the unconscious. And so
The Midgard serpent is, I think, a male.
it's the masculine within the feminine because the
Okay.
serpent's under the sea.
Okay, yeah.
That's
That's the yin and
that,
yang. Yeah.
yeah, which is what Peterson opened up the talk with is the yin
Yeah,
and
he
yang.
did talk about that too.
These things are deeply intertwined in what he talked about with the fundamental nature of reality. And so, but I would say the reason why I think the Vikings are so, or at least the Viking image has become so prevalent is one, there's the idea of the ideal masculine, right? And it's gone through stages, back in the early 2000s or the late 2000s, it was, Spartacus Blood and Sand was like the big thing that everybody liked. The gladiators that revolted against the slave masters under Spartacus and tried to fight for their freedom. And that's a completely different aesthetic take on masculinity than what the Vikings are. The Vikings are more primal.
But that's also that. Okay, so I'm gonna try and connect a few things here, and maybe I'm off, maybe I'm way wrong, and that's okay. All right, problem of induction or pattern seeking behavior. So, early 2000s, what was occurring? Well, oddly enough, those were the people who were down with the system and all other fun stuff, and they're also coming into the establishment in more ways, like really coming into the establishment, owning the establishment in more ways than one. And then I probably would need to look at, well, if we look at the woke movement, I would say that's intrinsically in many ways Christian related. Of course, there's probably some other things too, but like the woke movement, I think is very Christian related because Tom Holland writes his book, Dominion. And that is great, by the way. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it. And effectively, the victim has a voice. Christ gives the victim a voice in response to Rome, right? Oddly enough, about the same time, give or take, as the major slave revolts for Spartacus. I think it happens after Jesus' death. But anyway, and now there is a deep sense of wanting to travel and adventure through vans overlanding. I want to get an overlanding. That's a deep sense of adventure, right? Going out into the elements to test, man, metal, and mud, and that's intrinsically linked to Viking. So I wonder, with this pattern that we're kind of seeing emerge, what would be the next pattern? And I wonder if that also overlays with the 80-year cycle. I would be curious to see how that overlays. Maybe, I don't know, but I don't know.
I think there's so many different things that are going on with the way because one of the things, like I don't know if you ever watch the series Vikings, but it doesn't, like it even shows strong feminine, but it doesn't show like women subservient to the men. It really shows that there is a cooperation between the two. So
it shows the ability to be a monster and when to be violent. And
that's
your violence.
That's the berserkers, absolutely.
Well, that's just in general, right? That's across the characters. I'm watching Vikings now, and it's across the entire, like multiple character arcs.
Yes,
so much so that it is even embedded in Ragnar. It's embedded in Bjorn. Bjorn is younger than where we are in the series. He's a little asshole.
Yeah. What I'm getting at though is that so if you look at Spartacus Blood and Sand, the women were typically subservient to the men, and for the women to try to do anything, they had to be conniving. So they were really showing that shadow side of the anima. That's the social aggression and all of that.
Okay.
Now you get a little bit of that in Vikings to a degree, but it shows
you're always gonna get that.
but it shows that there's a cooperation between the sexes. So that kind of throws that monkey wrench in the whole men were oppressing the women throughout history narrative, because obviously that was not the case back in the Viking age.
It's both sexes are doing it. It's the strong, the ones. I think maybe I'm off right here. I would say the ones who are able to integrate their shadow and understand how to be monstrous, right? Typically don't connive the same way that a traitor or something like that would. They scheme, don't get me wrong, but it's a different type of scheming.
Well, if you take a look at Lucretia in Spartacus, like her character arc versus Lagertha in Vikings.
Yep.
Both wives to, high society males within the community. They're major female characters, but the ways that the femininity is portrayed is completely different. And I think it is a what would you say, an unconscious manifestation of what's going on under the surface or in the collective psyche of what's going on in society today. It's almost like an opposite mirror being held up. It's like, this is the way society is, and underneath the surface, this is kind of the way we would like society to be. So we're projecting that fantasy out into, television and things, and people watch it because Vikings was very popular. It was like the most popular series on history at the time. And you wonder why. Well, first of all, it's archetypical stories that are told, so that's what grasps our attention. But there's something deep, meaningful thing there, even if you don't realize it. It's there because otherwise, why would you watch it?
Yep. Agree. And I think that's always going to be a talking point too with Peterson at any lecture you go to. Just going to throw that out there. Writing and entertaining is not just as simple as entertaining. Yeah, and I mean, I think there's just some stuff I think we're scratching the surface. It's kind of going away from Jordan Peterson's talk in some regards, because there are things that are going on there that when they become publicly conscious, there's issues, right? And Game of Thrones is an example of that. I would say it's a collection of different archetypes, right? Acting out different things, and we see which one fails and which one doesn't, and we're invested in those characters. I think everybody cheers when Peter Baelish gets his throat slit. And everyone cheers when we see Arya killed the Night King. Be very interested to see what will pop up next. And even Marvel has its impacts in some regards, right? Because that's another type of almost religious like following. With Star Wars. And so these stories that we have out there that are publicly like major fandoms and whatnot, that are appealing to the masses are not to be taken lightly. Like, I mean, in Rule 2, Jordan Peterson allocates an entire section to that chapter talking about Quidditch.
Yeah.
Right. Which is the snitch. The snitch is the highest ideal. And you win the game or not, right? Mostly by catching it.
Yeah, in fact,
and
that's how you
focusing in every other domain.
Yeah, that's how the game is won the quickest.
Yep. Harry Potter does lose, I think, one time he catches the snitch. I think it's in Goblet of Fire. I don't remember, but it's not in the movies. It's in the books. So,
but it was definitely like I enjoyed the talk.
I did.
I think you enjoyed the talk.
Oh God, yes.
And I think you're right. I think we do have places to go because we're barely scratching the surfaces of these things. Unfortunately, I'm starting to get kind of tired because I haven't really slept much, but I would definitely like to continue this at a later point. In fact, I'd even like to invite one of my friends who's a
Lizzie.
existentialist, yes, and really dive into this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess uh, it was a great conversation. And I would say anyone who has a chance, regardless of your belief or your viewpoint on Jordan Peterson, because I had a great conversation on the way back with someone who thought he was all right, and that was really funny. Oh, I didn't tell you this, did I?
No,
Yeah, so I'm talking on some other Discord server, and Jordan Peterson's the gateway to the alt right guys. Steven Crowder is alt right apparently, and I was like, he's a comedian, a conservative comedian. I think you're being awfully. I pretty much said something to the effect of, I think you're being awfully liberal with your categorization of fascism.
yeah,
Because even I asked what his definition was, and I when he gave me his definition and used the words, well, and like back to back to back to back to back,
that means
I knew
he has no
instantly what
idea.
his opinion was and how ill informed it was. And
Yeah, I'd say
sometimes
I
it's
would.
just better not to
Yeah,
engage.
yeah, I agree with
So,
you on that one. But
uh,
we're gonna have to stop, or I'm gonna be kind
yeah,
of.
you're good. You're good. But go to Jordan Peterson talks, go there, and just write things out too. So
Yeah, see what it's
appreciate it.
all about. All right, man. You have a good night.
All right, man. Yeah, no problem.